Eagle 6 in the train.
Roger.
Viper 1 bombs away. 1's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Well, hello and welcome back to the DCS SITREP. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog. Once again, we're here to talk about DCS World, which, as you know, is the premier combat flight simulator for the home PC. It's brought to us by Eagle Dynamics and its numerous third-party affiliates. This week, we're going to talk about missile contrails, the 1944 map, and a few other little points of interest as well. So let's begin with what ED was referencing here with regards to missiles, which are seeing something of an overhaul. Let's start with the contrails business, and they said here that modern missiles use reduced smoke solid fuel rocket motors as well as liquid fuel motors. Now, the only problem with these is that at higher altitudes, due to the drop in temperatures, these low smoke motors cease being low smoke motors. The exhaust of solid fuel missiles, such as, say, the AMRAAM's HTPBAP fuel, contains hydrogen chloride, which at low temperatures forms crystal hydrates that generate a dense cloud. Thus, you can see it. The exhaust of liquid fuel missiles contains water vapor, which, equally so, generates a dense contrail in, naturally enough, cold air. So in winter, a contrail can appear even at really low altitudes, and at Arctic temperatures, the contrail may even appear at ground level. So they produced a screenshot here showing us an F-15C, apparently that's launched a missile at a target that's really high above it. And as you can see, the first part of the missile's flight has low smoke, inverted commas, where the air temperature is above negative 25 degrees Celsius. However, as the missile climbs, a dense contrail appears as the air temperature falls below negative 25 degrees Celsius. Now, on the Kola map, which as you are probably aware in the wintertime, up there it gets very, very cold, and temperatures down to negative 30 degrees Celsius can result in low smoke missiles having trails right down to surface level. This is an important tactical point, as the smoke trail reveals not only the missile launch, or where it was launched from, but also the trajectory of that weapon. Tactically, that's an advantage for the defending pilot, who can see where that missile was launched from and then take evasive action to try to either drag the missile away or probably defeat the missile so that it doesn't have an opportunity to damage or destroy your aircraft or effectively take you out. Now, as part of this series, if you like, on missiles, ED also have gone into some mathematical jiggery-pokery to update the guidance systems and the algorithms associated with some of the older Soviet missiles, in this case the Soviet SA-2 and the SA-3 SAM systems. Due to the low angular accuracy of the first-generation radars and the design features of the radio command control systems, noticeable fluctuations are observed in the flight path of SAM missiles. In other words, they're not that great compared to some of the more lethal modern systems. And I think there's a component here too, probably not calculated, but the skill level too of some of the command and control personnel. And I believe in Vietnam, the Soviets provided personnel who helped oversee some of the training, etc., for the North Vietnamese soldiers using these systems. But that's a kind of a side issue. But regardless, the limitations associated with these missiles lead to increased errors in the targeting, which was compensated for by a really big warhead. So they've implemented two guidance modes for these missiles. By default, the improved proportional navigation mode is used, but if the target uses a jammer or it has a velocity of less than 100 meters per second, pure pursuit is used. Now, they've updated here the pattern of the proximity fuse, and so this will provide new and more realistic SAM missile proximity blast patterns for the fuses. The proximity blast patterns is now a more realistic wagon wheel shape, which in that screenshot you should be able to see that hopefully. And so this means that it will allow the SAM missile warhead to more effectively fuse when the target is in the lethal area of the expanding rod zone. This increases the SAM's lethality. This new mechanism allows them to set unique shapes and sizes of patterns based on fuse and warhead types. So it's an important step in the development of munitions for DCS World, which I thought was pretty interesting. And they said here that you can expect the first implementation of this feature for the new AIM-120 air-to-air missile in the next update. Now, no word yet on what other missiles will be getting similar treatment in the future, and say, for example, Red 4 air-to-air equivalents to the AIM-120. We shall see how these things evolve. Very interesting. It's obviously going to change a little bit some of the mechanisms for avoiding these missiles and what kind of expectations we're going to have now, especially if they are going to be a little bit more lethal. So that's an interesting development, and we'll see how it progresses as the year wears on with updates in the game. So stay tuned on that. I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, Edie went into quite a bit of detail this week about the work that they're doing on the free Marianas 1944 map, which is currently in development and will focus on the brutal battles between the United States and Japan for the islands of Saipan, Guam, and Tinian, all in the summer of 1944. This coincided with the Battle of the Philippine Sea that saw large-scale naval warfare between aircraft carrier task forces. And obviously this form of warfare really has been the backbone for the use of aircraft carriers as a force projection in modern warfare, particularly by the United States, which currently still has the lion's share of power, if you like, and force projection around the world because of aircraft carriers. So let's talk about what they said here. Now, they mention here we have 3 key battles that they're focusing on. The Marianas Islands became a flashpoint in 1944, and it helped shape the outcome of the Pacific Theater of Operations. So the battles we're talking about here are the Battle of Saipan from June 15th through to the 9th of July 1944, the Battle of Guam, 21st of July to the 10th of August, and then the Battle of Tinian, 24th of July through to August 1st. So each of these iconic battles fought across rugged terrain in the sweltering summer heat there, showcased that there was evolving tactics of amphibious warfare combined with naval close air support. These battles changed the course of the war in the Pacific by establishing air bases within striking distance of Japan. And although we sometimes tend to focus a lot on the European conflict, some of the how do you call it? The close combat fighting that the U.S. Marines did in the Pacific, some of the more brutal fighting anywhere in the war. It was nasty stuff. If I remember rightly, I remember reading a piece by an Australian soldier who described it might have been in the Philippines actually. He basically said this is hell on earth as he watched the amphibious landing on entrenched Japanese positions. Such was the fighting. But yeah, there's some horrific stories that came out of the fighting in the Pacific. So this should be an interesting and exciting era. All right, so let's talk about island by island, which they showcased here. So they gave us basically a juxtaposition between the modern version of the map that we have right now and what the 1944 version is going to look like island by island. So while the modern island map features contemporary infrastructure, airfields, and urban centers, 1944 will present a significantly different depiction of these islands. So starting with Guam, today it's one of the largest US military bases in the Pacific, and it includes expansive naval and air force installations that cover much of the island. World War II area, we have small towns, villages, and relatively little infrastructure at that point. Tinian, similarly, it's sparsely populated and far removed from its prominence in global history. In World War II, it's an agricultural hub in the summer of 1944. It was later transformed into a crucial military staging area during the final stages of the war, including B-29 bombing missions over Japan. Saipan, today, it's a popular destination for tourism, with golf courses, resort areas, and recreational facilities. In World War II, well, it was dominated by plantations and small-scale settlements. Rota, both in World War II and today, it remains one of the lesser developed islands in the chain, with minimal changes over the decades. It offers a quiet life or pace of life in the Marianas. And Pagan here, so today it's largely uninhabited since a volcanic eruption occurred in the 1980s. It's mostly untouched by modern development, and in the World War II era it was home to a local population and Japanese military presence. So the goal of the Marianas 1944 map is to faithfully recreate the conditions that define the battles of 1944. You can look forward to authentic period-based airfields, buildings, vegetations, and agriculture, roads, and rail lines. The 1944 version poses the unique challenges of older navigation technology, limited logistical support, and high-stakes amphibious operations. This World War II era environment will offer an immersive glimpse into the intensity of the Pacific War. We'll see what it looks like. I know that there's been a very positive reaction from the community about the updated progress reports on the PTO, and that's going to breathe new life really into the World War II section of the game, which has a strong following. But a lot of you have been asking for updates on this and feeling like World War II perhaps has been a little bit neglected of late. Now, the good news is if you watched the Q&A from Wags yesterday, you will have noticed mention of the Hellcat 2, which has come up in discussion a lot. And he made a rare break from policy, or his personal policy, regarding commenting on third-party modules. So he said that the Corsair from Magnitude 3 is looking really good. This is very helpful information. There's no way Wags would have been that candid if the product was not up to scratch by ED standards. At best, he would have been more cryptic if he said anything at all. So that was a very positive sign. Furthermore, on the Hellcat itself, he said there's still a lot of work going on in the flight model, and these are complex things that need a lot of work. The mechanical systems and the damage model, which he said is also requiring a lot of work, but they are making good headway on that. So I'm optimistic for a 2025 release date. Probably, I wonder if they'll get it done by late summer. We'll have to see how things go. Wags didn't give a specific date, but again, he was indicative, if you like, or indicated that we're looking at a 2025 release at this stage. So fingers crossed for that. Stay tuned. Now, since it's come up, I think it's worth mentioning the Q&A from Wags. This was the part 2 Q&A for this year, and he indicated that it was sparked a lot by many user questions from the previous video, the previous Q&A video, that is. So he touched on various topics, including the dynamic campaign, which he admitted has taken the team a long time to produce, in part because of the complexity of the project, in part because they underestimated how difficult it was going to be. And there were complexities to overcome, including things like ensuring the campaign would run with a large number of units required to make it realistic. So there was a lot of positivity in there. And I think, too, computer technology has evolved. The game has evolved in that time as well. So you've got kind of parallel progression, and that can also create some problems. So some things that you couldn't do earlier then suddenly become available, so on and so forth. But it's been in the making for a very long time, and he admitted that it's something that he's been waiting for 10 years. This will be a single-player version, and he was hopeful that it was going to come out in 2025, later 2025, so we'll see. Now, the other topic that he broached was the F-35A and the data acquisition for module development in general, which I thought was really interesting. Wags advised that the research for the F-35A has largely been conducted by him for the last 2 years. And he reminded us that despite the secrecy around the project, there is actually a surprising amount of public data that they can use to recreate the module and DCS world. The caveat being that naturally it's not going to be a 100% accurate model, but he also reminded us that none of the modules will ever be 100% accurate. So this bled over to the topic about if you can produce aircraft X, why not aircraft Y? And this is something I've tried to point out in various prior episodes as well, obviously not typically successfully. Wags said in a nutshell that while the F-35A had what he described as a shocking amount of publicly available data from which to work with, many aircraft out there don't. And a lot of people find this very perplexing and perhaps paradoxical in some way. So this seems to be particularly so, this lack of data with some of the more modern Red 4 aircraft. He cited things like the Su-35. There are other aircraft as well that it's just prohibitive for them to get enough information again to reproduce the aircraft with the degree of fidelity that they're looking for. So, and as it's been pointed out to me, and I'll explain in a little bit here, but it's not just a matter of procuring a -1 manual and then assuming that you have everything you need. There's a lot of data that they need besides that, used as reference materials to create the degree of fidelity that the team, and indeed third-party teams, are looking for, and what we as consumers are looking for to provide at least some degree of realism. Now, I don't know how close they get to 100% realism. As Wags said, we don't get 100% realism in any of the aircraft, which makes sense because there's a lot of stuff that it's almost impossible to recreate in a video game. And so there are limitations. What we're looking for is enough realism that we have that suspension of disbelief that this isn't the real thing. We're looking for that immersion. We're looking for that degree of realism that fools us into thinking this is a pretty good replication, if you like, and simulation of the aircraft that we are enamored with. and we've decided to buy and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a satisfactory explanation. As he said, some people are still going to be unhappy, and that's just life. So that's a nice segue, actually, because I had the very good fortune of conducting a very exciting interview that I'm in the process of editing right now with Grinnelli Designs and the work that they're doing on the F100D Super Sabre. This occurred last weekend. We spent a couple of hours talking about the project, which I think will also similarly help unveil some of the processes behind recreating these modules within the limitations that they could talk about that. So even older aircraft like the F100 actually do present challenges in development, which was actually quite revelatory to me and helped again reinforce some of the things I understood, but also gave me some new insight into some of the problematic issues in the development processes of these aircraft. So I think you're going to enjoy dipping in behind the scenes of what that process looks like from a third-party perspective. It was a long interview, so it's going to take me a bit to pull all this in together. Probably in a couple of parts, we'll see what it looks like in the final guise here. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. Grinnelli is going to provide me with some footage that I can use and some behind-the-scenes material that hasn't been released yet in terms of artwork and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to putting all that together for you, so stay tuned. That's going to be an exciting one. Now, on the flip side of that kind of positivity that we have in the game right now, a couple of weeks ago we had some very disappointing news from Australian-based team Check 6, which some people have said jokingly they have checked out. Now, in a public post on their Discord, they announced that they have effectively folded, the company that is, due to what was described as internal issues. Now, the specifics of those internal issues weren't revealed, and I don't expect them to be. As far as I'm aware, I haven't seen anything more. There could be a number of explanations ranging from things like simple cash flow to personnel-related issues, and even a combination of those, not even necessarily conflicts or arguments or anything like that. Sometimes we go straight to the drama portion of these things, but there's any number of explanations for that. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the team, they were working on the top-end Australia map, which I'm aware that they were still working on, and I believe also I think it was the P9, which is a two-seat trainer. It's a prop aircraft. That was announced, if I recall correctly, sometime after the initial revelation about the map. So really sad there. Regardless of the causes, it's really sad to see a developer fall by the wayside like this. It's not typical, although we have seen issues crop up, say recently with Polychop, who talked about some internal issues, and people have left apparently that team. And we're still, of course, waiting for a resolution between Razbam and ED, which hasn't been announced yet. So it's a reminder that while for most of us this is a hobby, and in my notes here I've written hoppy for some reason. I can see the underline blue saying, why did you use that word? It doesn't fit in the context of the sentence. So while it's a hobby or a hobby for us, albeit an expensive one, for everyone else that's producing high-end content for the game, this is a business. And unfortunately, it's a competitive one, or actually, I think positively it's a competitive one and a very challenging one, because the standards of production these days are very, very high. But in that environment, unfortunately, it's inevitable there could be casualties from time to time. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And as I said, we've seen some issues crop up from time to time in the DCS environment. So it's very, very sad to see that. I hope everyone in the team is doing well despite the things that have occurred. And maybe we'll see somebody pick up in that gap that we have there. I'd love to see something out of the South Pacific. I did have a guy reach out to me who wanted to produce a New Zealand map a while back. Unfortunately, it was just not something that we were able to get kicked off. But there is a gap now, I guess, if somebody is interested in doing a portion of that part of the world. That's something you're going to have to work with ED on. But yeah, as I said, it's a shame. I don't want to end on a negative note this week. So despite that negativity, I think there's enough complexity in our real world lives, and DCS is a place that I come to try and relax and immerse myself in different challenges that distract me from terrible things going on around us. We still have, though, a really exciting depth of material in the game that's coming down the pipeline. We've got content on the way from people like Reflected Simulations, who recently has been showcasing several videos on his red flag campaign for the F4E Phantom II. It looks amazing. And it's another way of using the Phantom II that helps you get the best out of that aircraft. It is a complex aircraft despite not having all of the modern things that we expect from aircraft like the F-16, the F-18, and of course some of the other modern jets like the Mirage and even the F-15E. So those present different challenges in their own way, and that can be exciting stuff. WAGS is, as I said, hopeful for the single-player version of the DCS Dynamic campaign, which should be out by the end of the year if everything goes according to plan, so big fingers crossed there. And then we've got Heat Blur throwing out imagery with regards to the Eurofighter. We've got other third-party developers working on things. We've already talked a little bit about the Corsair. So there's still plenty to look forward to. So all in all, I'm positive about the state of DCS. We have a lot of projects to look forward to, as I said. And remember, one of the things that was really exciting from WAGS in the Q&A was that there is another helicopter in the pipeline that the ED helicopter teams are working on behind the scenes. That has not been announced or revealed just yet as to what that helicopter will be. So again, stay tuned. We'll see what that is. Give me your guesses in the comment section below. We don't have a Cobra, for example, so I'll throw that out there. If you have another idea, let me know. He did talk about the Black Hawk. That is something they would like to do, but it's not on the development process just yet because of the other helicopter that they're working on. So let me know what your guesses are in the comment section below. Well, thanks again for tuning into the SITREP. Thanks for the continued support. It helps the channel chug along, and I guess we'll see you next time on the DCS SITREP. We'll see you later. Cheers.